The crimson dawn of humanity's darkest hour began not with the thunder of war drums, but with silence. A silence so profound that even the chattering of birds ceased across 7 continents simultaneously, as if nature itself held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Dr. Elena Vasquez was the first to notice the anomaly. Working late in her laboratory at the Arecibo Observatory's successor facility in Puerto Rico, she watched as her radio telescope arrays began registering patterns that defied every known law of physics. The electromagnetic signatures weren't coming from distant stars or pulsars, they were originating from points in space that should have been empty void. "That's impossible," she whispered, her coffee growing cold as she stared at the cascading data streams. The readings showed massive gravitational distortions appearing in Earth's outer atmosphere, each one the size of a small city. Whatever was creating these anomalies was cloaked beyond human detection capabilities, visible only by the subtle ways they bent light and warped spacetime around them. Within hours, observatories across the globe confirmed what Elena had discovered. The objects, dozens of them, were maintaining perfect formation in Earth's upper atmosphere, creating a sphere of invisible watchers around the planet. The world's governments went into emergency sessions, but before any meaningful response could be coordinated, the visitors announced themselves. The ships materialized like mirages resolving into reality. One moment there was empty sky, the next, colossal vessels hung suspended above every major population center on Earth. They were beautiful in their alienness, crystalline structures that seemed to shift and flow like living things, surfaces that reflected not light but something deeper, as if they were windows into the void between stars. Marcus Chen, a software engineer in San Francisco, was among the millions who stood in the streets that first day, necks craned skyward as he watched the kilometer-long vessel hover silently above the Bay Area. The ship's surface rippled with patterns of light that seemed almost like writing, symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they were meant for minds vastly different from human ones. "They're not saying anything," his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, said in a voice barely above a whisper. "Why aren't they saying anything?" But the aliens were communicating, just not in any way humans had expected. The message came not through radio waves or visual displays, but directly into the minds of every person on Earth simultaneously. It was a sensation unlike anything in human experience, not hearing or seeing, but knowing with absolute certainty that thoughts not their own were being placed in their consciousness. "Attention, inhabitants of the third planet." The words, if they could be called words, carried weight beyond language. They resonated with authority, with the casual dismissal of beings who had never encountered meaningful resistance. "Your species has been evaluated. Your technological development presents a negligible threat to the sovereignty of the Zephyrian Empire. Your world will be incorporated into our domain. Resistance is inadvisable. Compliance will result in preservation of your basic biological functions. Non-compliance will result in immediate termination." The message was followed by a demonstration. The ship hovering over Moscow suddenly emitted a beam of pale blue light that swept across the city's skyline. Where the light touched, buildings didn't explode or crumble, they simply ceased to exist, their molecular bonds dissolving as if they had never been. Within minutes, a perfect circular void existed where the city center had been, edges so clean they looked like they had been cut with a cosmic scalpel. The message was clear: humanity's greatest weapons were toys compared to the power the Zephyrians wielded. President Catherine Morrison stood in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by the world's military leaders via secure video link. The faces on the screens reflected the same mixture of terror and desperate determination that she felt in her own chest. "Options?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. General Harrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, based on preliminary analysis, we're looking at technology that's centuries, maybe millennia ahead of ours. Our nuclear arsenal, our most advanced weapons systems, against what we just witnessed in Moscow, they might as well be pointed sticks. What about the other world leaders? Are we coordinating a response?" "Everyone's in the same boat," came the reply from the British Prime Minister. "We've got perhaps hours before they demand a formal surrender. Maybe less. But even as world leaders struggled with the magnitude of the threat, something else was happening. In universities, research facilities, and garage workshops around the world, human minds were turning to the problem with the unique perspective that had carried the species from stone tools to space travel in mere millennia. Dr. Amara Okafor, working in her laboratory at MIT, was examining the energy signatures from the Moscow demonstration when she noticed something the alien message hadn't mentioned. The dissolution beam hadn't just destroyed matter, it had converted it into pure energy following Einstein's famous equation. But the energy hadn't dissipated into space. It had been absorbed by the ship itself. They're not just weapons, she realized, her eyes widening as she ran the calculations. They're feeding. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, Chen Wei, a graduate student in quantum physics at Beijing University, was analyzing the ship's cloaking technology. The gravitational distortions Elena had detected weren't side effects, they were integral to how the ships maintained their invisibility. The aliens were creating localized warps in spacetime that bent electromagnetic radiation around their vessels. But that means, Chen muttered, his fingers flying over his keyboard as he modeled the phenomenon, they're trapped inside their own distortion fields. They can see out, but they can't see in real time. There's a delay, light has to travel the long way around the gravitational well. These insights, and hundreds of others, began flowing through the global communications network. The Internet, which had originally been designed to survive nuclear war, now became humanity's greatest weapon against an alien empire. Scientists, engineers, programmers, and basement inventors shared data, theories, and wild ideas in a collaborative effort unlike anything in human history. The aliens had made their first mistake, they had underestimated the speed at which humans could adapt. Dr. Vasquez, now coordinating with observatories worldwide, discovered that the ships weren't just maintaining position, they were slowly descending. They're not just making a show of force, she reported to the Emergency Council. They're preparing for something. Landing? Invasion? We have maybe 12 hours before they reach optimal tactical altitude. But 12 hours was enough. It had to be. The plan that emerged from the global think tank was audacious to the point of insanity. It required precision timing, unprecedented international cooperation, and technology that didn't quite exist yet. Most importantly, it required the aliens to continue underestimating human ingenuity. Marcus Chen found himself at the center of the most important coding project in human history. Working with a team of programmers from around the world, he was developing a virus, not for computers, but for the quantum communication systems that the aliens used to coordinate their fleet. The beautiful thing about their technology, he explained to his team during a frantic video conference, is that it's so advanced it doesn't expect primitive attacks. It's like using a sledgehammer to crack a lock, it might be crude, but if they're not expecting it. Dr. Okafor, meanwhile, was working on the energy component of the plan. If the ships were indeed feeding on the energy from their own weapons, then they might be vulnerable to energy overload. We need to create a resonance cascade, she explained to the international team of physicists. Force them to process more energy than their systems can handle. The key was the planet's power grid. Every nuclear power plant, every hydroelectric dam, every solar farm and wind turbine on Earth was being repurposed for a single, coordinated pulse. The aliens had demonstrated their ability to absorb energy from matter conversion, but what if they were suddenly forced to absorb the total electrical output of an entire civilization? Chen Wei's contribution was perhaps the most elegant. The gravitational distortion that cloaked the ships could be turned against them. By creating precisely timed electromagnetic pulses from strategic locations around the globe, humanity could destabilize the alien spacetime manipulation. The ships wouldn't just become visible, they would be temporarily trapped in normal space, unable to escape or fully utilize their advanced technology. As the alien ships continued their descent, their intent became clear. The vessels were positioning themselves for what could only be described as a harvest. Energy signatures from the ships suggested they were preparing to use their dissolution beams on a massive scale, converting Earth's major population centers into pure energy to fuel their empire's expansion. The countdown began not with any official announcement, but with a simple message that spread across every communication network on Earth: Project Prometheus, T-3 hours. In those final hours, humanity displayed the characteristics that had made them the dominant species on their planet. In Beijing, Chen Wei was running final calculations even as the alien ship's shadow fell across the city. In Cambridge, Dr. Okafor was personally overseeing the synchronization of power grids across continents. In Puerto Rico, Dr. Vasquez was coordinating with radio telescopes from Arecibo to Parks to create the largest electromagnetic array in human history. But perhaps the most crucial element was taking place in San Francisco, where Marcus Chen and his team were preparing to upload their virus to the quantum network. They would have only one chance: the moment when the alien ships lowered their shields to begin the harvest. The aliens, confident in their superiority, began their final approach. As they descended to optimal firing altitude, their ship's energy signatures changed. Weapon systems that could dissolve matter at the molecular level began charging, creating a low harmonic vibration that could be felt in the bones of every human on Earth. "This is it," President Morrison announced to the world. To every person listening to this broadcast, know that what happens in the next few minutes will determine the future of our species. We are not going quietly into the night. The first phase began as the alien ships reached their targeting altitude. Across the globe, every power generation facility on Earth suddenly began operating at maximum capacity. Nuclear reactors were pushed beyond their safety margins, hydroelectric dams released their full pressure, and solar installations tilted to capture every possible photon of sunlight. The energy buildup was so massive that it created its own electromagnetic signature, visible from space as a blue-white aura surrounding the entire planet. The aliens, focused on their own attack preparations, noticed the energy surge but dismissed it as a futile attempt at self-defense. This was their second mistake. The moment the alien ships began their attack, dropping their shields to fire their dissolution beams, humanity struck back. Marcus Chen's virus, encoded with the unique quantum signatures that Dr. Okafor had identified, was transmitted through the very energy beams the aliens were using to attack Earth. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the alien fleet. Their quantum communication network, designed to coordinate the actions of thousands of ships across multiple star systems, suddenly found itself processing information it couldn't understand. The virus didn't destroy their systems. It confused them, creating feedback loops that made each ship believe it was receiving contradictory orders from the others. As the alien ship's coordination collapsed, Chen Wei's gravitational pulse struck. The precisely timed electromagnetic bursts from locations around the globe created interference patterns that destabilized the alien spacetime manipulation. One by one, the great ships began to materialize fully into normal space, their cloaking technology failing as their artificial gravity wells collapsed. But the coup de grace came from Dr. Okafor's energy overload. As the planet's entire electrical output was channeled through the quantum communication network, the alien ships found themselves forced to absorb exponentially more energy than their systems were designed to handle. The same technology that had made them nearly invincible was now working against them, as their energy absorption capabilities became a liability rather than an asset. The first ship to fall was the one hovering over Tokyo. Its crystalline structure began to glow with excess energy, growing brighter and brighter until it resembled a small star. Then, with a flash that could be seen from orbit, it collapsed in on itself, its exotic matter creating a brief but spectacular implosion that scattered harmless particles across the upper atmosphere. One by one, the other ships followed. The vessel over New York began spinning wildly as its gravitational control systems failed. The ship above London split into geometric fragments that dissolved like snowflakes. The massive craft over Sao Paulo simply faded away, as if it had been nothing more than a mirage. In less than an hour, humanity had gone from facing extinction to witnessing the complete destruction of an alien fleet that had conquered dozens of worlds across the galaxy. The skies, which had been filled with the shadows of impossible ships, were clear once again. But the victory came at a cost. The coordinated effort had pushed Earth's infrastructure to its limits. Power grids across the globe were operating on emergency power, and several nuclear facilities required immediate attention. The electromagnetic pulses had disrupted satellite communications, and the energy surge had caused aurora displays visible even in broad daylight. Yet as the world began to assess the damage, a new kind of communication began to emerge from the wreckage. The alien ships, even in their death throes, had been transmitting data back to their empire. But thanks to Marcus Chen's virus, that data was now corrupted, filled with false information about Earth's technological capabilities. Dr. Vasquez, still monitoring the radio telescopes, was the first to understand the implications. "They're not just getting bad data," she reported to the Emergency Council. "They're getting data that makes us look like we're centuries ahead of where we actually are. The virus is making it appear that we have technology that can casually destroy their most advanced warships." The psychological impact on the Zephyrian Empire was immediate. Within days, long-range communications intercepted by Earth's listening posts revealed panic spreading through their military hierarchy. The loss of an entire conquest fleet to what they had dismissed as a primitive species was causing a fundamental reassessment of their expansion strategy. More importantly, the corrupted data was spreading through their own networks. The virus, designed to create confusion, was now propagating throughout the Empire's communication systems, creating an intelligence breakdown that would take years to fully resolve. But humanity wasn't content to simply celebrate their victory. The attack had revealed both their potential and their vulnerabilities. The global cooperation that had saved them from extinction became the foundation for a new era of human development. Dr. Okafor found herself leading an international team tasked with reverse engineering the alien technology. The ship's remains, though largely destroyed, still contained fragments of materials and energy systems that were centuries ahead of human science. "We're not just trying to understand their technology," she explained to the press. "We're trying to understand the principles behind it. How do you manipulate spacetime? How do you convert matter to energy with perfect efficiency? These are questions that could transform our entire civilization." Marcus Chen, meanwhile, was working on the next phase of the planet's defense. The virus had been effective, but it was only a temporary solution. "We need to assume they'll be back," he told his expanded team. "Maybe not this year, maybe not this decade, but eventually they'll develop countermeasures. We need to be ready." The plan that emerged from this new global alliance was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Using the principles learned from the alien technology, they would build not just better defenses, but the infrastructure for human expansion into space. If Earth was going to survive in a galaxy filled with hostile empires, humanity needed to become something more than a single-planet species. Chen Wei's breakthrough came 6 months after the invasion. By studying the spacetime distortions the aliens had used for cloaking, he had developed a theoretical framework for faster-than-light travel. "It's not about moving through space," he explained to his colleagues. "It's about moving space itself. We create a bubble of warped spacetime and ride it like a wave." The first test of human-built gravitational manipulation technology took place in Earth orbit a year after the invasion. The device, barely the size of a refrigerator, successfully created a localized distortion field that made a small probe invisible to both visual and electromagnetic detection. More importantly, it proved that humans could master the same principles that had made the aliens seem invincible. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vasquez, while analyzing the final transmissions from the alien fleet, discovered that the ship's AI systems had been downloading human internet content in the moments before their destruction. The aliens had been trying to understand human culture, to find weaknesses they could exploit. What they found instead was something they hadn't expected: creativity, adaptability, and an almost reckless willingness to try the impossible. The aliens had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never encountered a species that could fundamentally reinvent itself in a matter of hours. "They were looking for our weaknesses," Vasquez explained to the International Council. "But what they found were our strengths. And more importantly, they transmitted that data back to their empire before our virus corrupted it. The Zephyrians now know that humans are capable of rapid technological adaptation. This revelation led to the most ambitious project in human history, the Great Leap. Using the alien technology principles they had reverse-engineered, humanity began construction of their own fleet of starships. These weren't just defensive vessels, they were designed for exploration, for establishing human colonies on other worlds, and if necessary, for carrying the fight to the Zephyrian Empire. The first human starship, christened the Prometheus in honor of the project that had saved Earth, was launched 5 years after the invasion. Its maiden voyage was to Proxima Centauri, where automated probes had detected signs of an abandoned Zephyrian outpost. The mission, to gather intelligence about the Empire's structure and capabilities. What they found there changed everything. The outpost wasn't just abandoned, it had been hastily evacuated. More importantly, they discovered records indicating that the Zephyrian Empire was facing internal challenges. The loss of the Earth invasion fleet had triggered a series of rebellions among their subject species, worlds that had been conquered. The galaxy had underestimated human ingenuity once. It would never make that mistake again. Chen Wei, now an old man but still fascinated by the quantum mechanics that had saved his world, stood on the observation deck of the research station orbiting the galactic core. Around him, scientists from dozens of species worked together to unlock the secrets of the universe, their different perspectives and capabilities combining to achieve what none could accomplish alone. We were never the strongest, he mused to his research partner, a crystalline being from what had once been a Zephyrian colony world. We were never the smartest, and we certainly weren't the most advanced. But we were the most stubborn. When faced with extinction, we didn't just fight back, we learned to fight better. The crystalline being, whose species had gained their freedom because of humanity's initial victory, pulsed with colors that Chen had learned to recognize as agreement. Your species taught us that survival isn't about being the strongest predator. It's about being the most adaptable. The Zephyrians were apex predators, but they couldn't adapt to a galaxy that refused to be prey. As Chen watched the stars wheel overhead, he thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a single desperate plan born in the darkest hour of human history, to the foundation of a galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. The Zephyrians had seen Earth as just another world to be harvested, but they had missed the most important thing about humanity: they never stopped learning, never stopped growing, and never stopped believing that even the most impossible challenges could be overcome with enough ingenuity and determination. The alien empire that had once seemed invincible was now a memory, replaced by something far more powerful. A galaxy united not by force, but by the simple recognition that every species, no matter how small or seemingly primitive, had something valuable to contribute to the greater whole. And in the end, that was humanity's greatest victory, not just surviving the encounter with a superior force, but transforming that encounter into the foundation for something better than either species could have achieved alone.